So let's continue with our discussion on the administrative thought, and yesterday we have completed the discussion on Mary Parker Follett. Like we said that she is a linchpin between the classicals and the human relation theory or the behavioral theories, or one can also say a linchpin between the classical and the neoclassical theories in the organization theory, or rather we can say in the administrative thought chapter of your syllabus. Yes, we completed in depth about the ideas of Mary Parker Follett. Now let's transition from the classical approach to the one can say the human relation theory. So human relation theory, yes, very interesting. Lot of experiments were done by Elton Mayo and his associates that led to the birth of the human relation theory in the organization theory or in the administrative thought. So yes, sir, we will structure the session in such a way that okay, yes, Elton Mayo. Elton Mayo, human relation theory. Elton Mayo, human relation theory. So first we will talk briefly about what do you mean by the human relation theory. About human relation theory. Then we will discuss, one can say, why this human relation theory came into being. Yes, there must be some factors that came into being, and of course one can say and that one factor of was most likely will be that that there was more focus on the physical aspects of the organization and ignoring the human aspects. So what was yes, that was one context, but there are some others as well that so context or one can say the reasons for the emergence of human relation theory. Yes, briefly we will discuss about it, and of course how can a human relation theory be complete without talking about the experiments conducted by Elton Mayo and his associates. So the experiments, yes, first experiments. First experiment was the first inquiry experiment. First inquiry experiment. Then this was one can say not part of the Hawthorne studies. Later where Hawthorne a place where he conducted many experiments. So this was a one can say first inquiry experiment was a precursor to the Hawthorne studies. So yes, then after that he conducted the Hawthorne studies. So there he conducted a series of experiments, precisely one can say 4 experiments he conducted. First was the great illumination experiment. Great illumination experiment. Then he conducted the relay assembly test room experiment. Relay assembly test room experiment. Then he conducted the yes, the mass interview, or one can say social attitude and sentiment experiment, also called as mass interview. So next he conducted the social attitude. and sentiment experiment, also called as the mass interview, or one can say the group interview. Though it was not a specifically group interview, that's a group of people who interviewed, but most likely it was most likely no, but most of the time it was one-on-one interview. Okay, like how you will be interviewed when you reach the interview stage. Hope this is not gone. Oh God. Anyways, we'll write again. Okay, so he conducted those interview. First was, of course, we will discuss, we will structure that the context. Rather, first we will be talking about human relation theory, then the context for the emergence, context or the reasons for the emergence of human relation theory. Then, like always, then we will talk about the experiments conducted by Mayo, that is the Great Illumination, the first inquiry experiment. Then he conducted the Hawthorne experiments. That is the first, the Great Illumination experiment. Then the relay assembly test room experiment. Then he conducted the social attitude and sentiment experiment. Or one can say the mass interview as well. Then he conducted the bank wiring experiment. These were all the Hawthorne experiments he conducted. Yes, very impactful experiments. One can say the best experiments ever conducted in the history of humanity till now. Even no one has conducted such a holistic experiments on the working condition to infer about the details about the management, productivity, efficiency, etc. And of course, like always, we will talk about his criticisms and yes, relevance and application. Also, briefly after that, we will do some comparison between Mayo and Taylor. Okay. So, this way we will discuss, we will structure the entire discussion on human relation theory. So, yes, about context for reasons, what is human relation theory, etc. Those, most importantly, the experiments, the first inquiry experiment. Then after that, which became the basis of he conducting a series of experiments in a place called Hawthorne in the United States. So, these were the experiments, and then we will discuss the criticism, relevance, application, and briefly we will also do some comparison about the Taylor and Mayo. Okay. So, as of now, with our discussion on organizational theories, what was the focus on? Focus of Taylor and the classical theories. What did they focus on? Yes, what did they focus on? Yes, they focused on the efficiency and productivity, but which aspect they focused on? One can say the structural aspects. They focus on the principles, the structure of the organization. workers in the scientific manager were to be directed, do this, you will get a piece rate system, efficiency will be there in the organization. No one in this till now in the, one can say, development of the organizational theories, no one had talked about from the perspective of the workers, that how should we take into consideration the human aspects while talking about efficiency and productivity, or should we focus only on the structural aspects. So, these aspects were not taken into consideration by anyone till now. So, these aspects were not taken into consideration by anyone till now. So, one can say human relation theory of Elton Mayo, the HRT, for the first time looked into the human aspects of the organization. So, human relation theory was the first theory in the development of organization theory, or rather the first theory in the history of humanity to look into the human aspect of organization. Like we said previously, the focus of the other thinkers, that is, they focused on the, one can say, the structural aspects of organization, that is principles, division of work, hierarchy, then span of control, that structural part or mechanical part of the organization they focus to bring efficiency and productivity in the organization. They did not focus on the human aspects of the organization. That is, no one talked about that you can achieve efficiency and productivity by taking into consideration the one can say the human aspects of organization. No one talked about. So, these were the first people who were talking about the human aspects of organization, that is human aspects, that a human element of the organization should be considered to achieve efficiency and productivity in the organization. Yes, we briefly talked about MP Fullett, but her ideas were lacked we in the criticism. It's were based on more of an academic, it was based on her her experience and not rather but her understanding. She also lacked institutional support. This person started doing experiments, etc., and that is the reason it led to the birth of the, one can say, the human relation theory in the organizational theory. So, one can say they focus on the socio-psychological aspects. They focus on the socio-psychological aspects of the human side, and that based on those aspects one can achieve efficiency and productivity. Understood what is basically human relation theory? That is, it focuses on the human aspects, the human element in the organization, how human thinks, how human works, what motivates the human, when humans feel depressed, when they feel frustrated, how to motivate them, what can be the aspects, or one can say they precisely look into the attitude of an employee. That is human aspects, socio-psychological aspects. Yes, one can say Taylor talked about mental revolution, but that is very, one can say, at a very surface level. Is more concerned about achieving efficiency and productivity by focusing on structural aspects. That's why Taylor was designing those tools, shovels, etc., the pig iron experiment. That is he did not consider the human, that is more of a structural aspect, how much a person can lift a coal from the shovel, designing that shovel, etc. So, more on structural, non-human aspect of mechanical aspect. He is focused on the socio-psychological aspects. And the impact of the human relation theory is it was in such a way that once you understand the human aspects in organization, it also led to the development of other aspects, or one can say other dimensions in organizational theory. Those were the behavioral theories. Then it also led to human resource management. Then also it led to organization and development. So before one can say organizational behavior, extra human resource management, and also one can say participative management as well. Participation. Who were talking about participation before? No one was talking, because there was not much understanding about the human behavior in an organization. There was more understanding about the structural aspects. So this all also development later came as a result of the human relation approach. Yes, human resource management. You must have also heard that in private sector focuses on human resource. There is a HR, etc. In Government of India, there is also Ministry of Human Resource and Development, because human is considered as a resource. Previously, material and machines were considered resource. Finance is considered as a resource, but not human previously. This human relation aspects, now human was considered as a resource. So this is briefly about what is a human relation theory. A human relation is when looking at the human element in the organization. As human element, it focuses on human element as the most important factor in determining the efficiency and productivity in the organization, and not machines, etc. Not on the mechanical aspects, like how the classical theories and the scientific management of Taylor talked about, but on the human aspect, the human element in the organization. That is human relation theory. Okay, understood this much? Yes, and this how this all started, like the context. One can say, what was the context of the emergence of human relation theory? So what was the context or the reasons for the emergence of the human relation theory? There must be some reasons. What were the reasons? Human relation theory, which emerged in the 1930s. So what was the context for the emergence of human relation theory? There must be some context. Without any context, anything doesn't come, won't come rather. So yes, of course, the the reasons for the emergence of the human relation theory was the Hawthorne experiments conducted by Mayo and his associates. The Hawthorne experiments. The Hawthorne experiments conducted, yes, most important, those experiments conducted, and they came to realize that human aspects too needs to be considered to understand the various aspects of, one can say, of organization, how to increase efficiency and productivity. Also that time many industries, etc., had applied Taylorism at their workplace. Taylorism, scientific management, we all know, had become very popular even before publication of its papers, that is publication of his works in the form of scientific management theory, which came in 1911. So many after the in the light of the industrial revolution, etc., they applied scientific management of the Taylor, and World War happened. World War also in the highly successful scientific management theory, or one can say industrial revolution, was reasons for one of the success of industrial revolution in the Western countries was due to scientific management. But now a lot of time had happened since the industrial revolution, and also World War I had come to an end. People who working in those organizations were fatigued. There were some problems happening in the organizations, manufacturing, etc. So, and the operators, managers, the owners of this, one can say, the manufacturing unit, found that we had already applied Taylor, but still this organization is not working properly. So yes, so there was, one can say, the inadequacies of Taylorism. That Taylorism was not found to be sufficient to answer the problems which the organization were facing. Scientific management was not sufficient. They had already applied scientific management, yet there was problems of absenteeism, high turnover, efficiency and productivity was not, one can say, was not been able to achieve despite Taylorism. So, one can say scientific management theory of Taylor was found to be inadequate. It was found to be inadequate to deal with the issues of efficiency and productivity. So yes, this was one of the factors as well, and of course this was inadequate. That is, you can infer from this only that the third aspects can be that there was more focus on the physical aspects or structural aspects. Structural aspects were focused, so that's why efficiency and productivity was affected. The focus on the structural aspects, and one can say structural aspects or mechanical aspects were focused in the organism, and human aspects were not taken into consideration. That's why this, one can say, the reasons for the emergence of the human relation theory or human relation movement and the behavioral theory. Yes, it is interchangeably used that behavioral theory also incorporates human relation theory, but human relation theory will specifically mean Elton Mayo. Okay, also it is called as a neoclassical theory. Neoclassical because yes, when we discuss the criticism, you will come to know why we are calling as a neoclassical theory as a neoclassical theory. Okay, so this, one can say, is the reasons why why there was the emergence of the human relation school, human relation theory. Okay, so hopefully things are clear what is human relation theory and the context for the emergence of the human relation theory. So before he starts doing those Hawthorne experiments, he conducted a experiment called as the first enquiry experiment. First enquiry experiment. First enquiry experiment. So first enquiry experiment, he named it as a first enquiry experiment because it was a first experiment conducted by him. See, just a one nuance that the first enquiry experiment is not part of the Hawthorne experiment. Okay, Hawthorne experiment, there are 4 other experiments, but this is the first enquiry experiment conducted by Elton Mayo. So what had happened? There was a textile mill in Philadelphia, textile mill in Philadelphia. So textile mill, Philadelphia, textile mill, result of industrial revolution. Yes, Philadelphia, that rust belt, now it has become a rust belt because industries have vanished, manufacturing units from United States. But that time this was a hub of economic activity. Now the rust belt. So there was this textile mill in Philadelphia. So what had happened? There was one department, mule spinning department, called as the mule spinning department. See, mule spinning department, that mule spinning machine you must have read in the industrial revolution that when maybe in the world history where discovered by Crompton. Yes, Crompton, who invented this mule spinning machine through which you can at a very high rate you can convert the cotton into a cloth and in fibers. Yes, that was one of the reasons for the success of industrial revolution also, that machine, mule spinning department. Anyways, mule spinning machine. Okay, so there was a mule spinning department in the textile mill in Philadelphia. So, in mule spinning obviously department, so what will be of mule spinning, that is converting that cotton into fibers or a cloth, that way. So, there this is after the end of the World War I. Okay. Industrial revolution has certain years have happened successful because of, one can say, one of the reasons is Taylor, and also World War has also ended. So, people are back and people are not that motivated that countries are fighting, you should also work like a machine. So, mule spinning department, there was some problem there. Other departments in that textile mill in Philadelphia, other departments had a turnover of around 4 to 5%. So, turnover, not the financial turnover, but the turnover of the how many people are leaving the organization, the human resource turnover, one can say in the today's parlance. So, the turnover in the other department of the textile mills in Philadelphia was around 4 to 5%. But this mule spinning department had a turnover of around 200 to 250%. So, 200 to 250%, and the average turnover is 4 to 5%. There must be some problem. So many people are leaving. 200% means more people are leaving than joining. It is 100% means all are leaving. If 100% leaving, some more are joining, but the existing people are also leaving. So that is 200% turnover, 250% turnover in the mule spinning department. Something must be very wrong in that. People are not willing to work in this department of mule spinning. So yes, like obviously the owners of this textile mill were probably very worried. Something needs to be done. Why is that these people are not able to stay? We have already applied Taylorism, every aspect, efficiency, productivity, money as a motivating factor, piece rate system is there. But why these people are living still? We had the organization theory, it talks only about Taylorism, and the classical theories, everything has been applied. Still people are living. What to do now? They started to consult people. Obviously, in aspirant's life as well, if things are not working out, you may consult here and there. Why I am not clearing the examination, prelims or mains, despite going to so-called, despite studying very well, etc. You may consult, then you may realize that strategy must be wrong. That is, you may be applied scientific management or having a totally a social life. So that is a problem. Strategy also may be wrong. You will consult. So that way, these owners of the textile mills as well started consulting here and there. What is this problem? There is nothing available that we have already applied Taylorism, classical theory. There is nothing much development in the organizational theory. We consulted many engineers as well. Come and see what is the problem. Everyone tried to do something, but things did not work out. Still the turnover were very high. So obviously they will contact one of the best institutions in the world. They contacted the Harvard University. Harvard University, yes, and Harvard University then sent one of their professors to look into this matter, and that professor was none other than Elton Mayo. So Elton Mayo went there. So Elton Mayo went there. So Elton Mayo went to this textile mill, look into things, what is happening. So he adopted like a professor, like a teacher, obviously he will identify very systematic way. That is a very clinical method he adopted. He adopted a clinical method. That is, we'll look into this matter not only from the, one can say, with only physical aspects. We'll look into physical, socio-psychological, physical physiological, psychological, social, economic perspective. So, all dimensions we will explore and look into this, so that as to why these people are not willing to work in the mule spinning department. So, he began to study, and there he found one can say 2 reasons why workers are not willing to work, why there is such a high turnover in the mule spinning department. So, he understood the 2 reasons. One was lack of no communication. There was no communication between the, one can say, the other co-workers. Yes, there are, yes, in the manufacturing there are a lot of workers required, but that time also it was not much automatized as we have now, but lot of big one can say organizations were big, even small scale organizations, if we compare in today's context, they were very big that time. So, they say that this Mayo found that these workers were not able to communicate with each other during the working hours. Co-workers were not able to talk with other their colleagues, etc. Imagine you are also working and you are not allowed to talk, or rather you do not get the time to talk with your friends, families. Something will be problematic. That is kind of jail also. And in jail also there is social life as well. Yes, I have not been to jail. In the newspaper, etc., we read that. From that aspects we talk about. So, in jail also there is some social life, but this, they say they are not able to communicate with each other. Why they were not able to communicate? Because the machines in the mule spinning department were very noisy. There is very noise, tuck, 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 tuck. Some noise was already happening there. So, during the working hours, it was so noisy, we cannot communicate with each other. But we all know, most likely it was Taylorism at workplace. One may say that they would have talked in their lunch break, etc. But piece rate system, the more output you generate, the higher you pay, economic incentives. So, they may be working for high hours, so that they get more paid. So, very noisy, not able to talk with each other while doing work. Obviously problematic. Like if you recall that we, while discussing Mary Parker Follett, we talked about how doctrine of interpenetration and doctrine of whole, that man is a gregarious in nature. He will also form a group, and there is a two-way process of communication. The group will get identity, individuals will join the group, but here not able to talk. Where is group? Where is doctrine of interpenetration? Where is doctrine of whole? Yes, problematic, because no communication was there. And also one more, then you may say that they may have they can talk after the working hours, get together, etc., after the work is over. But that was not also the case, because the machines were as such that you have to walk a lot, here and there, from here to go to here, constantly go there, from one end to the other end. So, just mule spinning, a lot of laborious work. So, they got tired itself in the work also, in the workplace only. So, they were also suffering from fatigue. They are already fatigued. By the time the working hours are over, they are already very tired. So, tired, when you are tired, what you will go? You will go to sleep. That time society, there was no phone, etc., to unwind also, no television, etc. Only social life was a two-way communication, having friends, etc. So, they were fatigued. So, no time to enjoy social evenings, no time for social evenings. That society, that time, if no social evening, no time to one can say, if you consider in the India's context, no time to stand near a tea shop or have tea, coffee, etc. And this workers were going directly to the bed. And now the next day comes, next day same thing, Totally, one can say man can convert into near machine or near animal. But of course, it's United States, people are free there. They were leaving the organization, they were not bonded. So they were started to leave the organization. So that is the reason Mayo found, yes, there is no communication with each other. Their people are highly fatigued, they cannot have any social life after the work. So what he did? He introduced rest periods. So he introduced rest periods. That you can take some rest. It's not that you will work from when you come and to the lunch break and after the lunch break. He gave 4 rest periods. Introduce 4 rest periods. This is their lunch break. So 2 rest periods before the lunch break and 2 rest periods after the lunch break. Yes. So workers were happy. Now we can have some social interaction with our nearby co-workers and colleagues, even people from the other department. We have rest periods. Of course, because man is a gregarious in nature, man is a social animal. So yes, human aspects were considered then. Rest periods then, 2 rear and 2 before lunch and 2 after lunch. Also, he said that you can also earn rest periods, earn more rest periods. So you can earn more rest periods. He actually wanted them to that earn rest periods. I'll explain first this. Earn rest period means that if you achieve the target well beforehand, suppose you need to produce 20 mules before lunch break or before the first rest period, you achieve 20 mules long before the rest period. So you will get additional rest period. So you can earn the rest periods. So, but first he actually wanted to introduce bonuses in the financial terms, that if you work more than the target or achieve the target well before, you will get a bonus. But it was opposed by the manager or the owner of the mill. You said, okay, we will give them rest periods, not more money. So yes, then when on previous days we were nearly conducted as laborers with animals, no interaction, etc. Now we are getting rest periods, and we are also we can earn more rest periods. So they are also listening to us. Now we are not just interacting with our co-workers, but with the managers as well, the owners as well. Hardly we used to see them. Now they are interacting with us. Such a big person whose owner is interacting with us. That led to rise of their self-esteem and human dignity. We are also something. We are not mere workers. There is consultation also, because rest periods can be earned. And with all these changes led to increase in productivity in the mule spinning department. And also the turnover, which was 250 to 200%, dropped sharply and reached the near average. 250 to 2-3%. It's a drastic drop. This threw a light on the human aspect, how human aspects plays an important role in determining the efficiency and productivity. First time in the history of organization theory and the first time in the history of humanity, human aspects are determining the efficiency and productivity in the organization. But after this, the work started to increase. There was more demand. Most likely one can, if we hypothetically connect that it was the beginning of World War II, etc., more cotton extra demand was there. So cotton was supplied from this United States that time, and after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, or one around that time. So anyways, so more demand started to come for cotton. So the manager or the owner there stopped all this rest periods. No rest periods now, you have to work more. So all these rest periods and reforms were removed. And what happened? Workers were not considerate again that we are again transformed into animals. So the productivity again declined and the turnover started to increase, that people started to leave the organization. So human element is not to be considered in a temporary manner. Then again these all reforms were again reintroduced, and then productivity increased and turnover declined. So yes, this was a very insightful understanding of the human element or human behavior in an organization, that too first time in the history of humanity. So yes, this is the first inquiry experiment, and there Mayo and his associates found that there is something called as they also able to infer that attitude may be playing some role in this determining efficiency and productivity. So to understand that, they conducted the Hawthorne experiments. So understood the first inquiry experiment. What is this first inquiry experiment? Conducted around 1923. Okay. So 1923 this was conducted. Understood till now? Hopefully things are very much clear. If understood, then write down now. First we will write briefly about the Hawthorne experiments, Hawthorne or rather human relation theory. Then we will talk about the context and the emergence of it, and then we will so write down about the Hawthorne human relation theory, write about it. So human relation theory is about looking at the organization. Human relation theory is about looking at the organization from a human face, and considering the human factors is the most important factor. Looking at human factors as the most important factors in determining efficiency and productivity. As human factors are the most important factors in determining efficiency and productivity. Which was realized on the basis of the Hawthorne experiments, Okay. Therefore, the human relation theory heralded a new era, or rather started a new era. Okay. Started a new era in the organization theory known as the human relation era. As organization tried to achieve efficiency and productivity, by application of scientific principles, till now, but henceforth management got a new tool, known as the socio-psychological factors. Known as the socio-psychological factors, to achieve efficiency and productivity. Therefore, the human relation theory gave rise to many other dimensions in organization theory. Therefore, the human relation theory gave rise to many other dimensions in the organization theory based on the socio-psychological factors. So, write down what it gave rise to. First, organization behavior. Right. Second, the behavioral theory. Right. Third, the human resource management. And fourth, participative management. At fifth, organization and development. Now, you write the context and emergence of human relation theory. So, give the heading context and emergence of human relation theory. So, write in that human relation theory emerged in the 1930s. On the basis of first, the findings of the Hawthorne experiments. Findings of the Hawthorne experiment. Next, write second reason for the emergence. So far, there was focus. On the formal. And the mechanical aspects, that is the structural aspects of the organization. So far, there was focus on the formal, mechanical and the structural aspects of organization. Next, organizations during this time, that is during the 1930s, organization during this time were facing problems which the scientific management failed to address. Okay, this is what is human relation theory and the context for the emergence of the human relation theory. So, write down now about the first enquiry experiment. This is before the Hawthorne experiments conducted by Mayo. So, first enquiry experiments 1923. A textile mill in Philadelphia, particularly its mules, right this way, the mule spinning department of a textile mill in Philadelphia was facing some problems. The problems were, first, the turnover was very high. Approximate 250%. Turnover was very high, approximate 250%. Approximate the 250%. Whereas the average turnover was around 5 to 6%. Second, the problem, right this way, the morale of the people in the mule spinning department was very low. The textile mill consulted many engineers. Consulted many engineers, but none of them was able to provide a solution. So they contacted the they contacted the Harvard University. Which sent Mayo to look into the problems of the problem, who was working as a professor in the Harvard University. So, right further, now Mayo has come. The research undertaken by Mayo was the first such research. So, he named it as the first enquiry. Next, next point. Mayo took up a holistic study and considered all possible factors. That is, physical, physiological, social, psychological, economic. That is, he adopted a clinical method to study the problem, and there he identified two major problems. The first problem was, workers were not able to communicate with each other. As it was very noisy. Workers were not able to communicate with each other, as it was very noisy. Now second, they were fatigued and suffered from foot trouble, because of which at the end of the day they were totally exhausted. And unable to enjoy the social evenings. Mayo came out with an idea of rest periods, a total of 4 rest periods, and the worker can also earn rest periods. That is, if a target is achieved well beforehand, then a worker can have more rest periods. And as a result of which, right this way, as workers were able to interact with each other and communicate with each other, the morale increased, and so did the productivity. So the problem of turnover and fatigue vanished. But after some time, with the increasing demand, the supervisor removed all the rest periods, and the productivity fell again. And then again this rest periods were again introduced and productivity rose. So on the whole, communication, a sense of dignity, responsibility, and a sense of belongingness, which the worker felt, were the reasons for the increase in productivity. Also, it led to the rejection of rabble hypothesis. What is rabble hypothesis? That is a individual mode of production, that an individual will think from individual perspective. That is, you are getting economic incentives, but no, you are a part of a group. That's why it rejected the rabble hypothesis of Taylor, of which was, or rather one can say, rabble hypothesis on which Taylorism was based. As Mayo realized the importance of self-esteem, recognition, and human dignity, which became the basis of his further experiments. Known as the Hawthorne Experiments. Hawthorne Experiments. Okay, understood the first inquiry experiments. Let's move further to the discussion on the Hawthorne experiments. See, that experiment was, one can say, give some insights, and also that was not such a mass level, rather other experiments were not also mass level, but very broad level of experiments were conducted, one can say, on by Mayo and his associates. They came to be known as the Hawthorne Experiments. Now, what is this Hawthorne? Hawthorne is a place in United States. Obviously, that is how everything development happened in the Western world. So, Hawthorne is a place in the United States, there where Mayo and his associates conducted a historical experiments in a Western Electric Company. Western Electric Company, there they conducted these experiments, and there were around 25,000 people employed in that organization. So, 25,000 people were employed in this organization. There they conducted this series of experiments, and it was experiments were sponsored by the Harvard University. Okay, so yes, the 4 experiments which Mayo and his associates conducted were: the Great Illumination Experiment, the Great Illumination Experiment, the Relay Assembly Test Room, Experiment, Relay Assembly Test Room, then the Social Attitude and Sentiments Experiment, or also Mass Interview. Social attitude, also known as mass interview. And lastly, the bank wiring experiments. The bank wiring experiments, these were the experiments conducted at the Hawthorne plant of the Western Electric Company. So yes, so experiments means certain approach they had followed. So obviously, if it is experiments, then it has to be, they followed an empirical approach. Empirical approach. Empirical approach. Then obviously they will follow, if it is empirical, they document whatever they see, not what they feel. So they adopted a descriptive approach. Descriptive, describing what is. Rather than prescriptive, that is what ought to be. So they adopted a descriptive approach. And of course, you are looking at the human behavior. So you are talking also about psychology, you are talking also about physiology, physical aspects, psychological aspects. Then you are also talking about management. Management, yes, in organization there will be management. You are talking from the worker's perspective. So organization as well, economics, management, psychology, sociology, everything. So it had an interdisciplinary approach. So this is, one can say, the basics of the, one can say, the crux of the experiment. These were the experiments and these were the approaches. Obviously in schools also you must have done some experiments in your laboratory, school laboratory, science etc. laboratory. Before doing experiments you will hypothesize something. That hypothesis needs to be tested, then you will test, then you will document the result, isn't it? That is how experiments work, and this experiments is conducted on such a broader scale on humans. So obviously there will be some hypothesis. So yes, Mayo hypothesis were hypothesis of the Hawthorne experiment first. Obviously they till now the era was more about the physical working conditions etc. So they will test whether physical conditions affect the productivity, whether physical conditions affect productivity. Yes, till now physical conditions were the only determined factor of productivity and efficiency. Physical, structural, mechanical aspects should be proper structure, hierarchy etc. Scalar chain, working environment should be safe. Security needs, yes, one of the activities of the manager activities as outlined by Bhawale is security activities as well. So whether physical conditions play important role in productivity, and obviously people are doing some that time that society people are doing repetitive jobs, so you get monotonous. So whether monotony is just a state of mind or is it real? It's whether it is in your mind only that work is monotonous, or really monotony affects your thinking and critical things and cognitive things, and that reduces your efficiency and productivity, thereby making you frustrated and depressed. So yes, whether they wanted to test whether monotony is a state of mind. Whether monotony is a state of mind. Then other hypothesis they wanted to test is what was the other hypothesis they wanted to test? Yes, we were talking about some managers also. From manager perspective, they want to test some hypothesis. So yes, manager means what can be the style of supervision. Previously there was a style of supervision was more of formal etc. It was not we were considering the informal aspects, or rather the human aspects in the organization. So whether there is a link between the style of supervision and productivity. So one more hypothesis they were testing whether so this yes whether there is a link between style of supervision and productivity. Now we are talking about these physical condition. Obviously we will talk about the social conditions. So one more hypothesis they wanted to test whether social conditions affect efficiency and productivity. Whether social conditions affect efficiency and productivity. So these were the broad hypotheses they were testing, and based on this hypothesis, or one can say what they decided to test, they conducted a series of experiments. So let's come to the first experiments, that is the Great Illumination experiment. So great elimination experiment. So great elimination experiment. So yes, what was this experiment all about? Now obviously if you are conducting experiments on humans, you need some humans, you need some volunteers to, so that on them experiments were conducted. Already big organization, 25,000 people employed, so no dearth of people to conduct experiments upon. So they identified a group of people, they chose 12 girls. Okay, the experiments was on girls, so 12 girls they had chosen. So 12 girls they choose 12 girls as volunteers to be part of this elimination experiment. So all those hypotheses they wanted to test. So one by one they started to test, and this experiment they conducted, the great elimination experiment, with 12 girls were chosen, and they were divided into two groups, the experimental group and the control group, or one can say experimental group or the test group. So 12 girls were divided into two groups, 6 girls here and 6 girls here. So now let's begin the experiments. We got our volunteers. So they wanted to test whether physical conditions can affect, one can say, productivity or efficiency in the organization. See, you are also living in, most of you must be living in the old Rajendra Nagar or in Delhi, or even if you if you're working in your, even if you are living in your home, no worries. So there you also may be focusing on physical conditions of where you study. You want ambient temperature. So if it's winters very cold in Delhi, you want a heater. On the other hand, when it's the cruel summers in our subtropical country, you want air conditioner. So some structural aspects you also take into consider as a physical, for physical comfort. You believe that physical comfort will help me focus more or study more. Yes, it can or it may not be also. Most important is focusing and studying. Okay, these are periphery, and this will also prove how it's periphery. So there too, and the working when in a factory, etc. Physical conditions must be there, some ventilation, etc. Lighting, etc. Humidity, optimum temperature in winters and optimum temperature in the summers. Also in today's big organizations, rather very big organizations today, like the man companies, physical conditions are also focused upon. It's neat and clean, very structural, comfortable working conditions. There are also, one can say, proper lighting, proper air conditioning, lifts are there, so that there is no physical exertion, that people are not physically tired. So yes, there too they started to experiment with the physical conditions. So obviously experimental group and the control group. So the experimental group were obviously were used to manipulate the physical conditions, or they are working, they both were working, and we will manipulate the working conditions of this and will remain this control group stable. We won't manipulate the one can say the physical condition of control group, and then we'll compare the productivity. Then we will able to infer that or rather conclude whether physical conditions will does it affects productivity in the organization or not. Yes, so they started to, so physical condition, yes, so you start to manipulate the or change the temperature under they are working. They start changing the humidity and lighting also. Light, you make the light sometime bright, sometime very dim, etc. So that they started to experiment. So if physical conditions are one can say are playing a role in determining efficiency and productivity. Then these physical conditions are getting manipulated. So yes, productivity should also go down and go up according to this physical conditions. That is what the classical theory was, etc. was, one can say, based on. But they focus on the structural aspects. Structural is proper, then productivity will be proper. But they found that this productivity experimental group efficiency is almost similar to the control group. There is no changes in the output. Then they do, let's see, maybe we are not changing the physical condition to a certain extent that it is affecting the productivity. So let's change it very drastically. So they reduce the light of this people, of the girls under which they are working, the light of that one can say the working place, to very dim level. Very dim level. Let's reduce to very dim level, and they reduce to such a dim level that barely you can see. That barely one can see. Even at the dim level, the productivity increased. Isn't it very surprising? Productivity increased even at the dim level. Now, what to do? Even Mayo and his associates were highly startled with this fact. This entire history of organization theory was more focused on the physical working condition. We have reduced this light or manipulated the physical conditions to such a dim level and the productivity got increased. Then what to do? Then yes, it will increase. Then it led to the rejection of the Taylor's hypothesis or Taylor's works that physical conditions and physiological conditions are important factors in determining productivity. Very startled, and they further concluded that physical conditions have no role in determining the efficiency and productivity in the organization. It was very surprise to everyone. Even today it's very surprising, even if manipulating the physical conditions, still productivity got increased. Yes, you have in your aspirant's lab, you have comfortable room, air conditioner, everything, but still some of you may have cleared also, some of you may have not able to clear. But the other person is able to clear without any discomfort. So physical condition, one can say, are not the determining factor of efficiency and productivity. At least in this context, it may be determining. It's not that I am not saying that you as an aspirant should live very treacherous or hard life. It's not that. If you study as you were studying in your life as a student, from school to college to here, that is a continuous process. If you felt comfortable in studying in a comfort environment, that will work for you. If you have been studying that way, it's not that you have to face hardship, etc. It depends on how you have been studying till now in your life. It's just a continuation process, but this exam is just, it's a bit competitive, a bit more, or rather the most competitive. That is the only difference. Rather, education and learning, etc. is very continuous process. It doesn't happen in silos. And don't worry for the fact that if you have not performed well in the prelims or performed well till now in the UPSC journey, or performed not well till your education journey till now, it doesn't matter. Past hardly matters in UPSC. It doesn't matter at all. What matters, whether you are clearing the examination, that is what matters. In an interview, etc., it doesn't matter what is your academic record, how your performance there, rather how you perform well in the mains examination. That is the determining factor. Anyways, so let's come here. So there's the very startling revelation that conclusion came that dim level also productivity got substantially increased. Yes, everyone was very startled. So this for this to further investigate this, they conducted the second experiment. That is the relay assembly test room experiment. So let's move to the next experiment. So relay assembly test room experiment. Now let's further dwell into, you must have thought, let's further look into why is this thing is happening. We are even startled. This tears down the entire history of organization theory till now. So he took forward the experiment, that is he continued with the same experiment, that is same set of volunteers, same set of those girls, those 6 girls in control group and 6 girls in the test group. So he said, now let's manipulate with the rest periods. Okay, we come to know that physical conditions, but let's see if whether we manipulate with the rest periods, whether there will be increasing productivity or no. So what they did, they continued with the experiments and relay assembly test room. So they brought in the rest periods, they introduced rest periods. So they introduce rest periods. So like the first inquiry experiments, here too they introduce the rest periods. So you can also earn rest periods. The girls can also earn the rest periods, and others, and in at one instance as many as 6 rest periods were introduced. Lot of rest periods were introduced, as many as 6 rest periods, as many as the 6 rest periods were introduced. 6 rest periods were introduced, and interestingly, so many rest periods, the girls themselves did not like. They said that we do not want so many rest periods. So okay, now we are introducing some other elements, that is some comfort elements, that you can take a rest, not just lunch break, before also you can take a rest. This is on the experimental group. Now after some time they withdrew this rest periods. Okay, now let's withdraw this rest periods. So they withdrew their rest periods. Naturally the productivity should decline. Yes, it declined for a while only. It declined for a while and later it increased. Even without these rest periods, it declined for a brief period, then it increased very sharply, even more than the previous productivity, that is when rest periods were there. When the girls were, one can say, producing 400 relays in the relay assembly test room, they were now producing 600 relays even without rest periods. So this was very startling, very startling. You reduce rest periods, that is that is first your physical condition, now this rest periods, very startling. So the greatest turn in the tide of organization theory this was. It threw a great emulation, great emulation experiment, the great emulation threw a great light on the social aspect, that the human aspects are determining the efficiency and productivity, because they conclude that the girls have undergone attitudinal changes. That attitude plays a role in the determining efficiency and productivity in the organization. The style of supervision plays a role in the determining efficiency and productivity in the organization. A sense of human dignity and sense of belongingness was also played a role in the determining efficiency and productivity. Sense of belongingness. You are the chosen one for experiments. 25,000 people and 12 girls. You got to feel special. Everyone are looking at them as experiments have been conducted on them. 25,000 people and 12 girls. And 6 are being experimented. So they got attitudinal changes. Yes, this was very one can say very thought provoking and very throw a new light on the organization theory, organizational aspects. It became to one can say in a way they it was turning tide in the organizational theory that it came to realize that social man is considering a worker as a social man is the determining factor for efficiency and productivity, not economic man. Economic man was considered by Taylor only economic incentives, but here we are talking about social man. And also group dynamics, groupism plays an important role. Group dynamics or group behavior rather plays an important role in determining efficiency and productivity in the organization. Group of girls, there in television peace rate system. No, he rejects individual mode of production, but he says that collectivism should be in terms of managers and workers. That is terrorism. There was a protest that it was against trade unionism. Unions not at worker level, but here group, people working in the group. There was self-esteem and a sense of participation that girls itself felt generous that we have been selected to do experiments after those 25,000 people. So this is a very great illumination experiment, the relay assembly test room, and there in this they thought there is also a role of attitude in these experiments. On the basis to find the role of attitude, they conducted the next experiment. So understood till now what is this a great illumination experiment and the relay assembly test room. See, relay assembly test room is, one can say, is a continuation of the great illumination experiment, but it was conducted on different variables or different settings. So that is why a relay assembly test room. But the great illumination experiment will also include the relay assembly test room experiment. Yes, interesting, isn't it? So now write down about this Hawthorne experiments. So write first briefly about Hawthorne experiments, then we will start writing about each of these experiments. Hawthorne experiments. Hawthorne experiment was a historic study. Hawthorne experiment was a historic study. In the study of administrative theories. In the study of administrative theories. The experiment was conducted. Hawthorne, okay. The experiment was conducted at the Hawthorne plant. Hawthorne plant of the Western Electrical Company. I am not sure whether this Western Electrical Company became later the General Electric Company. I need to check. So the experiment was conducted at the Hawthorne plant in the Western Electrical Company, which had 25,000 workers. And it was sponsored by the Harvard Business School. It was sponsored by the Harvard Business School. The experiments were conducted in 4 phases. First, the great illumination experiment. The great illumination experiment. Second is the relay assembly test room. Third, the human attitude and sentiment experiments. human attitude and sentiment experiments. And fourth, the bank wiring experiment. Bank wiring experiment. The bank wiring experiment. Okay, write down about these broad aspects of these experiments. The experiments adopted. The experiments adopted. First, the experiments adopted first. A descriptive and empirical method. A descriptive and empirical method. Descriptive and empirical method. Second, an interdisciplinary approach. Interdisciplinary approach, that is various discipline aspects were tested. One can say the polyglot nature of public administration. Interdisciplinary approach. So study was conducted from physical, physiological, economic, social, psychological perspective. So all this perspective were looked into while conducting these experiments. Next, right? Researchers developed the following hypothesis for conducting experiments. Researchers develop the following hypothesis for conducting experiments. Right, first, whether physical conditions whether physical conditions conditions of work, whether physical conditions of work affects productivity, whether physical conditions of work affects productivity. Next, right, next hypothesis which they tested. Whether monotony is a state of mind. Whether monotony is a state of mind. Monotony is a state of mind. Whether monotony is a state of mind. Right, next hypothesis which they tested. Whether there is a write this way, what is the relationship between the style of supervision, morale and productivity. What is the relationship between the style of supervision, morale and productivity? what is the relationship between the style of supervision, morale and productivity. Next, right, whether social conditions whether social conditions of work affects productivity. So, these were the hypotheses they were testing. Now, right, give heading the Great Illumination Experiment, about the first experiment at the Hawthorne plant. The Great Illumination Experiment. So, right here, a group of female workers were selected. And they were divided in two groups. A group of female workers were selected and they were divided in two groups. So, first group, the experimental group or the test group, which consisted of 6 girls, and next the control group, which consisted of another 6 girls, 6 and 6. So, 12 people were were asked to volunteer for the experiment. So, right below that, the experimental group were subjected to different variations. The experimental group were subjected to different variations in the physical conditions. That is, the experimental group were subjected to variation physical condition, that is the temperature, humidity, the lights were varied, or one can say manipulated. To check whether the physical conditions affected their productivity, and at one point the lights were reduced to such a dim level that one can barely see. Lights were reduced to such a dim level that one can barely see. Despite this, the girls continued to work hard. And in fact, their productivity increased. And the researchers, that is Mayo and his associates, were unable to understand why the productivity increased even in dim light. To know this, they conducted the second experiment, but at the same time, they concluded but at the same time they concluded that the physical conditions concluded that the physical conditions concluded that physical conditions concluded that physical conditions have no role that physical conditions have no role in determining efficiency and productivity of the organization, have no role in determining the efficiency and productivity of the organization. Therefore, it was the rejection of the Taylor's hypothesis. It was therefore the rejection of Taylor's hypothesis that physical and physiological, despite it was a rejection of the physical and physiological factors affects productivity. Physical and physiological factors affects productivity. Now, write about give heading the relay assembly test room experiment. The relay assembly test room experiment. This they continued with the same sample. They continued with the same sample. That is, they continued with the same girls for the relay assembly test room experiment. Same sample for the relay assembly test room experiments. Yes, so the control group and the experimental group was the same. So, right, the control group and the experimental group was the same, but were subjected to different variations. First, right, break periods were introduced. First, right, the different variations were break periods were introduced, rest periods were introduced, break periods were introduced, rest periods were introduced, rest periods can be earned. Next, right, rest periods can be earned. Right, next, as many as 6 rest periods were introduced. As many as 6 rest periods were introduced. So, these were the broader variations they brought in. So, write further. After some time, in that as many as 6 break periods were introduced, rest periods were introduced. Right there, the girls did not like so many rest periods. In the bracket, you can write the girls did not like so many rest periods. Right after that, researchers later withdrew all the changes and to a pre-experiment stage. Before that, all those variations, that is, researchers withdrew all the changes to a pre-experiment stage. So, what was the result after that? Initially, the productivity went down. And then it increased. Initially, the productivity went down and it increased. And girls were able to produce. if the girls were able to produce 400 relays, after these changes they were able to produce 600 relays. 400 when rest periods were there, now 600 relays. Rest 600 relays. Again, the researchers were very surprised with the behavior of the girls. Again, the researchers were very surprised with the behavior of the girls. Mayo outlined. There was a turn of a great tide. The great turn of a great tide in the history of organizational practices. So there was a great turn of tide in the history of organizational practices. As the girls have undergone attitudinal changes. This was a great turning point, that girls have undergone the attitudinal changes. Because before, we all know classical theories, they did not talk about attitude, human behavior, etc. They were all focused on structural aspects. So girls had gone attitudinal changes. That is a link between moral supervision, a link between ring among between two people, between two variables. So a link among moral supervision and the style of morals, style of supervision and productivity was established. A link among moral, style of supervision and productivity was established. The findings of this experiment, that is the relay assembly test room experiment, was very significant. The findings of this relay assembly test room experiment were very significant, which became the basis for the finding of the concept of social man. Right, next, importance of group dynamics and group behavior. Next, right, self-esteem. Next, right, a sense of participation. So right there, after that, the role of attitude was not that clear. So if the role of attitude was not clear, so what he will do? He will conduct one more experiment, that is, he conducted the third experiment, that is social attitude and sentiments experiments, also called as the mass interview. Okay, so this experiment he conducted. Next, so what is this experiment all about? Social attitude and sentiment experiment. Social attitude social attitude and sentiment experiments. Or mass interview. Also called as the mass interview. Now, let's find out the role of attitude. That's why this continued with this experiments. He wanted to find the link with and attitude and productivity. What role does attitude plays a role in determining the productivity? So let's do some experiments. The attitude, you can know the attitude of people by talking with them. At least that way they thought. Even today we also, if we interact with this, people for the first time, we also come to know what kind of attitude they have. Prejudice attitude, learning attitude, ignoring attitude, positive attitude, negative attitude, or a neutral attitude. So to know the attitude of the people, that is to establish a link between attitude and productivity. To know the attitude, obviously you need to interact with people. So Mayo cannot interact with any people because he want to find the link between attitude and productivity. So productivity, for productivity he will interact with the workers only, which he has been experimenting on. So he and his associates, or one can say the research team and their managers, decided that we will conduct some interviews to know the attitude, social sentiment, etc. Social sentiment and attitude experiment. So we will interact with the workers. We will have some interviews, one-on-one interviews in that sense. So the managers, supervisors will interact with the people, and we as a research team will observe the interaction, etc., and we will document our findings. So this is how they decided that this way we will conduct the interview on a broader scale. So okay, then people started to come one by one, but yes, before interviewing we should create some questions. So the questions are created on the basis of the organization. In the organizational context, they want to establish a link with attitude and productivity. So they will naturally make questions which are in the context of organization. So they questions were based on the policies of the organization, the programs run by the organization. Questions were on management, etc. So all these aspects of question they had framed beforehand, and so people started to come one by one. That interview is been conducting now. Let's conduct interview. So started to ask question about this, and this. So this was management will ask question about this, and they started to answer. But interestingly, they did not keep the discussion, the workers, only in this sphere. They started to talk about their family as well. So their family, their personal life, their family, their personal life. Normally also in organization setting people talk about that, but it's not their questions were beforehand framed as well, but still they were talking about their family, their personal life, etc., their children, all they started discussing their family, how is their family, any family issues if it persists, how their family is going. Even they started to talk about the situations, or one can say things which are outside the organization. Maybe they were talking about politics, etc., how life is changing. Normally in our country also, most of the talks also happen. People talk about that heat is increasing, inflation is increasing, there is people are not like before now. This is what generally people from the older generation will say. This generation has changed, people are not like before, this is not the 90s era. So that this were hardly very startling, that despite we are talking questions about what is the policy, do you like this policy, that we are having so much of work today, at what is this is our foresight, this is our vision of our company, but they start to talk about their family, their personal life, their children, they're talking about things outside the organization. So this is the interaction, but we are hardly objective, we are this all, but you are talking about all this. Then interview came one by one, the interview started, and one by one interview happened, and one by one people started to leave. And after the interview, the workers felt, yeah, things have improved in this organization. I am feeling very good in this organization, things have improved, something is improved, I am getting the good feeling, the feel factor I am getting, something has changed. Some workers also feel, yes, things have changed, I am feeling very positive in this organization. And also yes, it seems that the wages have also increased. People got that feeling, the workers got that feeling that wages have increased, there is a good feeling. Feel good factor also, when we are talking about good governance, is also about the feeling. They started to feel good in the organization. They also started to feel some side of their wages have also improved. Even the managers felt that we have better understood this organization, we have better understanding of these workers, and even they felt that things have improved substantially. But did anything improve in actuality? Nothing had improved physically in the organization was as it is. The wage was as it is, but still the worker felt that things have improved, wages improved. The Mayo and his associates concluded, it is only because the workers were able to talk directly with the managers. There was sense of belongingness. There was a ventilation therapy happened. Our feelings which we had subsumed were released. That is, pent-up feelings were released. We also were able to talk with the manager about our personal life. We are feeling good about it. Managers also felt we are now better understand the workers. Suddenly organization started to improve, everything started looking great, but nothing had improved physically. So yes, things have got better. So yes, they established that attitude plays a role in productivity, the sense of belongingness, etc. That also transformed the attitude of the workers towards the organization, management towards the workers, just a mirror of equality. They also opened up of their personal life. But nothing has improved in reality. Organization is the same. That's why many consultation, etc. also happen. One can say Niti Aayog, governing council, only talks happen, nothing happen at the below. Every state comes and they raise their grievances that center is not providing funds. We will walk out, we will do this, you are not providing water, that state is obstructing water, same government is at the center and that state and they are obstructing our water, Punjab and Haryana issue. This they come and talk, yes, one can say it's a forum of mass interview that let the chief minister come, release their pent-up feelings, ventilate their grievances, which they are just which the feelings are now getting, instead of suppressing, release them. And when the chief ministers will go back to their state, they will feel, yes, things seems to have improved now. But nothing in actuality has improved. That is how one can say Niti Aayog also actually functions. Governing council has been criticized by many chief ministers, etc. Even former chief minister of Telangana, KCR, called it as a useless organization. So that way, how this pent-up feeling and mass interview is. So yes, they were able to establish the etc. But while conducting these experiments, they also came to know that there exist some informal groups within the organizations. There exist some informal groups. While doing such interviews, etc., people were opening up that they will also open up with respect to some what is happening in the organization. Some informal groups were existed in the organization, and to know this informal groups, etc., the aspects of these informal groups, they conducted another experiment, that is the bank wiring experiments. Okay, so write down this much, then we'll discuss the bank wiring experiment. Bank wiring, the human attitude and sentiment experiment, or in the bracket you can also write mass interviews. So write down This experiment was designed to test. This experiment was designed to test. This experiment was designed to test the role of. This experiment was designed to test the role of. This experiment was designed to test the role of attitude and productivity. This experiment was conducted to test the role of attitude and productivity. Next point, questions were designed so that workers can express their, so that workers can talk, rather write this way, workers can talk about their likes and dislikes about management, working conditions, likes and dislikes about their management, working conditions, policies and programs of the organization. Right, next point. When the workers were interviewed, they did not merely respond. Workers did not merely respond to the questions. But also added many other dimensions. Workers did not merely responded to the questions, but also added many other dimensions which were not related to the question. They started to talk about their family problems. They started to talk about their family problems. The social conditions outside the organization. Started to talk about the family problems, social conditions outside the organization. After the interview was over, the workers felt the working conditions have got better. The wages too have improved. But in reality, nothing had changed. the researchers also felt before researchers write this, the supervisor's attitude also changed. The supervisor's attitude also changed. And the researchers felt they have researchers felt they have researchers felt they have acquired a new skill to understand the workers and further outlined workers felt dignified when questions were asked to them. Workers felt dignified when questions were asked to them, as there was a feeling of satisfaction. A sigh of relief. And the release of pent up feelings. Whatever you have suppressed till now, you have released your feelings. So, release of pent up feelings. Penta feelings. They also came to realize the presence of informal groups. They also came to realize the presence of informal groups in the organization. And to understand those, they conducted the next experiment, that is the bank wiring experiment. That is, they conducted the bank wiring experiments. So, now let us move to the bank wiring experiment. What is this bank wiring experiment? Bank wiring experiment. Now, the informal groups, obviously you need to select some group to, yes, they wanted to check the one can say the work of informal groups. They realize some informal groups are there in the organization, they may be affecting productivity, etc. So, you need to check the behavior of the informal groups, and to understand these informal groups, they conducted the bank wiring experiment. And to understand groups, you need a group to experiment upon. A group, if you select such groups or divide people in such groups, that is, they are not interacting with each other, then what is the point of experiment? So, they took they selected a group which are interrelated to each other. That is, they are doing work which is interrelated to each other. Group of people having a total of one can say total of 3 groups, each group having some group of people, those group of people doing some interrelated activity. So, they selected 3 groups. One group was involved in soldering activities. Soldering, that is solder, you do soldering, you heat that, use that thing to solder electronics, etc. Soldering activities. Other group was involved in fixing terminals. Another group was involved for drawing wires. So, you are drawing wires. So, you take wire, you solder the wire and fix that terminal so that there is electricity. So, this one can say interrelated activity. A group of people was doing this activity, a group of people was this doing activity, a group of people this was doing this activity. What Mayo and his associated observed, that okay, you are doing work, okay, well and good, well, let us check your productivity. They saw that your productivity is X, suppose it is X, but they found that they are not working according to their potential. That is, they can produce more. One can say hypothetically, they assume that they can produce X plus 100, not just 100 units of work, or one can say if they are doing 100 units of work, they can actually do 200 units of work. So, they said okay, let us see, we will try to manipulate things as well and experiment. That is what we are here for doing experiments. That is what Harvard has sent us to do. So, they said let us do one thing, we will give them some incentives. We will say if you produce around 200 units, we will give some incentives, economic incentives, you can earn more. So, they said that if you produce more, you will get incentives. So, this is what they thought, that now incentives are given, at least they will produce more, you are getting more paid, piece rate system, is not it, produce more, individual produce more, but they are considered from the group aspect, terrorism was from individual perspective. So, group, you produce more, you get incentives. Then Mayo started again. Despite we are giving you more money, you are not producing more. It is not that you do not have potential, you have the potential, you can produce more, still you are not producing. Then they came to realize the presence of some informal groups within the group, and the informal group had some code of conduct, and the group motto was, we should no matter what, we should not produce more than this. Even if you are able to produce, even if we are paid more, they still will not produce more than this. So, we are not able to produce more than this. So, what was that informal code? So, they said that for this to happen, that we are not able to produce more than whatever we are capable of, no one should produce more. So, obviously there should be some rules. So, they discovered the existence of what they called as a code of conduct within the groups. So, what was this code of conduct? So, code of conduct they came to realize. Some 4 code of conducts they had. So, first code of conduct, obviously you should not produce more. No one should produce more than what is pre-decided. your work is producing 5 units, you should produce 5 only. You should not break the group's code of conduct. So, if one produces more than the decided rate, that person is called as rate buster. That is you should not produce more than so and so unit. Every individual, we have 3 groups, we are alternating activities, every target will be fixed. You should not produce more than that, even if you are paid more, or even if you are capable of producing more. You should not. If you do, you are a rate buster. This is one the informal code which had. Then the next code of conduct, one should not if one should not do too much work, then one should also not do too little work. If you do too little work, then productivity of group activities total fall down, then productivity goes very down, units will become very less. Whatever we are producing will produce less than that, and management will get a chance to remove us also. So, you should not do too little work as well. Should not too much work. You should not do too much work. One should not do too little work as well. If you do too little work, you are a chancellor. If too little work. If you do too little work, you are a chancellor. Now, group activities are there, everyone should remain a group. If one person maintains a distance, then suspicion will come. So, to ensure that also, that you should not maintain too much distance from the group, you should remain in the group. And if you maintain too much distance from the group, or act officious, this is what the term use, act officious, then you are an inspector. So, maintain too much distance from the group. You are an inspector, or act officious, that is you should act officious. It is also called as, this entire one, maintain too much distance of the, also referred as act officious. So, you should not maintain isolation from the group, you should remain in the group only. If you are not eating with us, then you are an inspector. So, obviously, if you are maintaining 2 meter distance, so they had already one more control code of conduct on them. You should not say anything detrimental to the group to the supervisor. You should not do grapevine about the group. You should not say anything detrimental to the supervisor. Should not say anything detrimental to the supervisor. If you do, you are a squealer. You are a squealer. You are a squealer. If you maintain too much, if you say anything which is detrimental to the group, you are a squealer. So, see, this is all the informal code of conduct which were present in the group, and this informal code of conduct control the group behavior. Even if you are able to produce more productive, will not be able to become more productive, even if one individual decides, but the group is controlling that person through this code of conduct. Squealer, Chester, Red Buster, Inspector, not maintaining too much distance from the group, not busting the rate, not doing too little work, not saying anything detrimental to the group to the supervisor, about the group to the supervisor. Otherwise, you are a squealer. So, this code of conduct control the group productivity. And there, if you go back to the Taylorism or the classical theories, who talked about this? Group dynamics. They were all that if productivity is less, we will design new machines, we will give them more money, piece rate system, but this can also control the productivity, and this is the aspects which were long ignored, and after the in the 30s etc., even after applying Taylorism still productivity did not increase because of this. There are group dynamics, group behavior etc. Yes, so group activities, this informal groups it throw light upon. So Mayo concluded with this. Some aircraft industry experiment also it was conducted in 40s etc. Not much important. Let's see if we get time. Next time we will discuss about that as well. So Mayo concluded one should not ignore the human aspects in the organization. Human aspects in the organization. So manager along with technical and looking into technical and economic aspects should also look into the human aspects as well, especially morale, motivation and communication. So based on these experiments he concluded all this, and one can say this also with this experiment led to the rejection of many aspects of Taylorism. So what aspects he rejected of Taylorism? Social aspects are you need to consider, that is the human aspects are needed to be considered. So then he led to the rejection of the economic man. The man was looked from the economic perspective, classical economics of scientific management. That is, incentives should be based on only monetary terms, not the social aspects, not considering their feelings, belongingness, totally ignored by Taylor. So it started to reject. What aspects of Taylorism it rejected? It rejected the economic man. Next, what it rejected? The individual mode of production. Rejected the individual mode of production. Economic man, individual mode of production. The role it also rejected that monistic motivation, monistic aspects of motivation, that is only economic aspects motivate an employee, but social aspects also play a role in determining morale and motivation of the employees. And further it rejected that only management has the understanding of organization, or rather we can say it rejected that management has a complete organization of understanding of the organization. Managements were not aware of those informal groups. Organization is also shaped by workers by those informal groups. Previously it was believed that in the Taylorism, in the classical, the management knew everything, they will control productivity etc. Productivity is also controlled by workers with these informal groups. So this became the basis of the rejection of economic man or economic aspects or structural aspects in organizational theory, and the importance of the human aspect. The human aspect it gave, one can say, the importance of human aspect, economic man, worker, informal groups etc. Okay, understood. Write this much then. So write about the bank map wiring experiment. they write about this bank wiring experiment. To observe a group of workers, that is we have already written, right, bank wiring experiment, what is all about. That is to observe the group behavior at this way, to observe the group behavior, to observe the group behavior. Mayo identified a group of workers doing interrelated tasks. That is, he identified 3 groups who were doing interrelated tasks. The tasks were soldering, tasks were soldering, fixing terminals, tasks were soldering, fixing terminals, tasks were soldering, fixing terminals, and drawing wires. Wages were also paid. On the basis of group incentives. Depending on the total output of the group. It was found the output remained lower than the management's target. The group did not allow to increase the output. The group was restricting the output. And all people of the group were controlled by the informal code, that is a code of conduct which the researchers found.